Hey guys, Crave here, and so I was torn on which of the three specs I mentioned in my last few videos I wanted to talk about. So while I discussed Paladins in the X-Pack preview and briefly touched on the Prot Warrior spec, the Guardian Druid forms also got my attention. Now, well, to be honest, I'm still unsure, but I guess I'll keep watching Blizzard's updates as the months roll by on which tanking spec really should be getting my attention. And, actually being on live is going to be another thing too, and sometimes really the actual feel of the gameplay can change your perspective to basically switch to that class. So, but anyway, as I promised, so I'd be doing another video. So for this particular one, I will be talking about my old-time favorite, which is the Prot Warrior spec. So some of the talent picks for the Prot Warrior spec are pretty much covered in the Arms Warrior Talents preview that I did, but I will also touch on them pretty quickly. So let's see how the Prot talent tree is looking like so far. So row number 1 only shares one similarity with the arms tree, which is Shockwave, and the only difference so far is the lack of damage multiplier. So there is a 1.25 damage multiplier for the arms tree. We have none for the Prot Warrior spec, so it's basically just some basic damage. So, but even with that, it still has the standard stun, damage, and cooldown reduction depending on the number of targets in the frontal cone. Now, Siegebreaker, which used to be a late game talent, is now a first row possible pick. It's still that strong damage attack with a knockdown effect. Now, the last pick looks like a Prot specific option now and has some very nice changes. So Warbringer is adding a damage component, can affect all melee mobs within, basically within the charge target's range, and will stun for 1.5 seconds. So that basically stuns everyone in that group. So that's a pretty good change for the last pick. Now, for tanking, for PvE rating and all that, Shockwave is still looking good to address multi-mob scenarios, while Warbringer can be good if you have to immediately charge into a different set of mobs, maybe within the same, in the instance. And Siege is going to be looking like a raid boss option. Well, yeah, it's going to be a raid boss option. So the first row all has useful options. The second row is not, I guess, not as exciting as the first row, but the abilities are still useful. So Vigilance is still so far pretty much the same and is useful if you expect another raid member to be taking some pretty strong damage effect. Bounding Strike is still a mobility augment to Leap, and Crackling Thunder looks like a very nice buff to Thunderclap. So on the last option, Crackling increases the radius of your Thunderclap ability by 100%. So just basing it on the current 8-yard radius, so it looks like it's going to push it to 16 yards, which is actually, if you think about it, is pretty big. It really addresses those mobs that are pretty much spread out. So even if you pick Warbringer in the first row, there will be those situations where a mob or two will be lagging behind or running a bit ahead of the others. So this particular talent helps to gather them and make sure you have all their eyes focused on your warrior. So options are very situational for row 2. Yeah, it'll really depend on the mechanics of the instance. Tier 3 looks good with Renewed Fury, Ultimatum, and Avatar as options. So the tier is very much DPS oriented, and that's a good thing. I mean, tanks are better off contributing a little bit more to the overall raid damage numbers. Being the meat shield is slowly becoming a thing of the past. Now, Renewed Fury works with Ignore Pain in that it increases the damage you deal by 10% for 6 seconds. So just recall what Ignore Pain does. So it's the sort of, well, the nature isn't new, but it's a newish mitigation ability based on your maximum health. So since Ignore Pain will be up in many scenarios, you can pretty much expect the damage boost on a regular basis. Now, the second and last picks see no changes, so it will really depend on which abilities will deal more damage over the course of an encounter, unless the snare or root removal from Avatar becomes mandatory. The fourth row only has Inspiring Presence as the new talent picks, so you also have Second Wind and Double Time as options. Now, the Second Wind ability works pretty much the same as it does for Arms Warriors, and that's pretty strange, but anyway, you do get healing for not taking damage for a certain period of time. Now, Double Time for Prot Warriors will work off Intercept instead of Charge, so this means you get some charges for Intercept. You can basically use it back to back. Now, What's important for Intercept is that it's seeing a possible change in Legion where it will sort of have a dual function. Now, it can function as your basic charge ability, so you charge towards an enemy, or it works as you can also make it work as it does right now, where you sort of protect an ally from damage. So, regardless of how you use it, the ability will generate rage. Now, back to the new one, which is Inspiring Presence. So, it appears to be a raid-wide passive that grants a leech effect. So that's a very strange thing to see for a warrior, but I can see how everyone will love this. Uh, Damage dealers in the upper brackets are going to, yeah, like I said, love this. So I don't think Second Wind will be an option in any situation in raids unless a tank swap has you sitting with nothing to do, but that's not really optimal. So I think it really comes down to presence or intercept, and I do have a feeling that most raids will want you to go with the new talent. Tier 5 is a really good tanking tier in my opinion. So you've got Best Served Cold, Never Surrender, and Indomitable. Now, Best Served Cold is really just the right name, and what it does is that it gives you 1 rage for every target you hit with your Revenge ability. Now, I have to mention the potential change for Revenge. So in its current state, Revenge affects a maximum of 3 targets, and it will generate 20 rage. Now, it might see a change in Legion where it will affect all targets in front of the warrior. So it's a frontal, I'm guessing it's a frontal or a full 180 arc, I'm not sure. And it will generate a smaller amount of rage instead of the fixed 20 rage. So because it works off a cooldown, it will be important to sort of maximize the mob count in front of you to get the most out of this particular talent. So of course the CD can be reset assuming you can get avoidance to work in your favor. Now, Never Surrender is another option which augments the new-ish Ignore Pain ability by giving 30% more mitigation based on missing health. Now, the last pick increases your max health by 25%, so we still have to see whether that's on base health or buffed health, but yeah, I'm guessing it's going to be on base health. And yeah, on this tier, I like the last two last two choices basically because it really diminishes incoming damage or gives your healers more room to work with. And of course, as with most of my tanking guides, my priority will be of course mitigation instead of a larger health pool. The 6th tier is interesting in that it's a mix of DPS and some convenient stuff thrown in. Now, Vengeance works 2 ways where it can reduce the rage cost of Ignore Pain if you use Heroic Strike and vice versa. Now, the second option, Into the Fray, named like the mobility talent for rogues but works differently, it gives you 5% more haste for each enemy within a 10-yard range. Now, the last option buffs Demo Shout where it gives you 50 rage and increases the damage done to targets affected by your shout. For this tier, I like Booming Voice so far, as it really gives you that emergency mitigation for high damage situations, since you can put an ability like Ignore Pain while Demo Shout is up. The last tier has a very defensive nature to it with a mix of other things thrown in. So Anger Management reduces the cooldown of Shield Wall and Last Stand when spending Rage. Heavy Repercussions still works the same way it does with Shield Block and Shield Slam. And Ravager is basically also the same talent which grants a parry chance to Protection Warriors. Now, from a defensive point of view, it looks like it will really depend on the fight, the mechanics, and those things. So I guess if you expect frequent heavy damage, then Anger Management might be the way to go. And if things are showing a lot of physical attacks, a lot of melee attacks are basically coming your way, coming the way of your warrior, then yeah, Repercussions or Ravager are good options depending on which additional utility is needed. And those are your current talent options for the Prot Warrior class. And yeah, again, things can change as we are still some ways off from Legion, but it's nice to know that we do have this information right now, so we can sort of get an idea of what tanking will look like for our traditional Sword and Board class. And yeah, it looks really good at the moment. I mean, when you consider the exciting stuff and some of the standard abilities, yeah, it looks very solid for Warriors and Legion. And yeah, one more thing, it also pretty much wraps up this series of short series of talent preview uploads that I've been doing. At the moment, these are sort of the classes that I'm excited about. I wanted to discuss Warlocks, but unfortunately, like I mentioned, I didn't know much about Warlocks to be, talking about it. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to a number of classes. But right now, as I keep reviewing the current previews, yeah, A lot of the classes are looking really interesting, looking really good. So, and it's very much appreciated that Blizzard is doing a lot of effort into making sure that each spec and class combo has sort of more identity or a more unique feel to it. It's a whole lot better than sort of being pigeonholed to a number of specs and classes. And like I always say, more options is always a good thing. Yeah, so please check out my other talent preview uploads if you haven't, and leave a comment below on which class and spec combination really catches your eye from what Blizzard has been showing so far. Thanks for watching, guys.